My name is Lee Cartwright. I have a practice in Santa Fe that focuses on the neurological resolution of trauma. I have a degree in massage therapy and in counseling, and I'm not licensed in either because I'm immoral. No, because I don't do either. What I do is I do Lee. I have a certain gift where I can read the body on a really detailed level, exactly where trauma is, and I work there specifically. And I've come up with literally hundreds of different techniques for different parts of the body. And today's class is about my favorite strategy for working with the enteric nervous system. A little bit more background. As of this Wednesday, I will have been married 31 years. Very, very lucky. And I'm more in love with Ursula every year, but I just want to say how big a part she is in landing all the material that I bring through, making it real, making sense of it. So a lot of the credit for whatever I come up with really belongs with her. I do tend to move around a lot. I tend to talk with my eyes closed. Take it personal if you'd like to. Do whatever you need with that. So, today's talk is about your second brain, your enteric nervous system. The enteric nervous system can be an incredible resource. It can help you know when it's right to trust. It can help you know which risks are right to take. Achieve the unimaginable. It can also totally tie you up in knots. Make your whole life miserable. And if traumatized enough, leave you gutless. This is actually a cartoon. If you look real closely, it's Dr. Seuss back in the 40s, and this was a political cartoon that he did in favor of the US government when we were trying to garner interest in not appeasing Hitler. And he understood that when someone was truly gutless, they weren't willing to stand up for what was absolutely necessary in their lives and in the world as a whole. So just what is this enteric nervous system? The enteric nervous system is a network of neurons that governs the functioning of your gastrointestinal tract. It's embedded in the lining and runs all the way from the esophagus, which is here, all the way down to your anus. It's amazing. Check this out. The enteric nervous system has around 500 million neurons, which is more than the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems combined. How much is this nervous system included in trauma writings? 0. Even the really incredibly elegant, brilliant work of someone like Stephen Porges, there's hardly any mention of enteric nervous system, even though the enteric nervous system has more nerves than the sympathetic and parasympathetic combined. Is that safe? The enteric nervous system is often called the second brain. Why? Because the enteric nervous system, unlike the sympathetic and parasympathetic, can override the brain. The enteric nervous system can and does act independently. Now, what does that mean? It means that if your brain tells your sympathetic nervous system to activate your adrenals, the sympathetic nervous system will do that. If your brain tells your parasympathetic nervous system to slow down your pancreatic secretions, that will happen. But if your brain tells your enteric nervous system to have a bowel movement, the enteric nervous system might go, maybe next week. I'll let you know when I feel good about it. Now you're really freaking me out. The main parasympathetic nerve that connects the brain to the gut is the vagus. Did you know that over 90% of the neurons in that vagus nerve transmit data from the gut to the brain rather than the other way around? Someone talking to me? Oh, it's your gut. It's your gut talking to you oftentimes, along all those parasympathetic vagus nerve fibers. Inside your gut are opiate receptors that are identical to those in your brain. Thus, your gut can be just as addicted to heroin as your brain can. About 95% of your body's serotonin is in your gut. Is it any surprise then that SSRIs, which increase the accessible serotonin, can have incredible bowel symptoms as side effects? So a drug that's designed to help the brain, and oftentimes can help the brain, in fact might create incredible GI distress as a side effect, and it's because the gut-brain relies on serotonin as well. Inside the lining of your digestive tract, from the stomach down to the rectum, are endocrine hormone secreting cells. As a consequence, your gut is the biggest endocrine gland of the entire body. Now this is trippy. If you did a medical experiment and you actually hook up someone to feeding tubes so they, sounds horrifying, but you insert food into the person through tubes, through the mouth, that go into the stomach, the person's mood changes based on the different foods that are inserted into the stomach, with the person having no awareness of what the food is. Check that out again. Not because there's this mental impression of the food, but rather the food registers differently in the body itself and changes your emotional state. Thus, what you eat directly affects how you think and feel. Tell me when this part of the talk is over with. Oh. Food doesn't affect my brain. Is it safe to come out yet? Okay, here's a statistic you can see all over the internet, all over reputable sources like NIH, National Institute of Health. There's 10 times more cells of microflora in your gut than there are cells in your body. Now, there's some more conservative researchers that are coming out and saying that's probably drastically overstated. It likely might just be just as many. But just think about that. Even if the conservative researchers are right, from your mouth down to your anus, there's as many cells of microflora in that tube as there are cells in your whole body. And guess what? They come into your body the same time you do. So many spiritual traditions talk about how the soul enters the body during the birthing process, and that's exactly when the microflora comes into the body. Because when we're in utero, we're largely sterile, and it's passing through the birth canal where the occupation by microbiota starts. So I have a curiosity. If we both come in the same body at the same time, are they in our body or are we in theirs? Or maybe we really share this body. I can't take any more. Okay, some quote from some brilliant researchers, from Emmerin Mayer at UCLA School of Medicine. The enteric nervous system is simply way too complicated to evolve only to make sure that things move out of our colons. From J. Pasricha at Johns Hopkins. For decades, researchers and doctors thought that anxiety and depression contributed to bowel problems, but our studies also show that it may be the other way around. So way too often in my practice, people come in and think that their emotions are influencing their body, and yes, that's possible, but oftentimes the body is influencing the emotions as well. Back to Emmerin Mayer. A big part of our emotions, what he's saying is a big part of our psychological state is probably influenced by the nerves in our gut. back to J. Pasricha at Johns Hopkins. The enteric nervous system doesn't seem capable of thought as we know it. It can't balance our checkbook, but it communicates back and forth with our brain with profound results. But just what could the enteric nervous system do? What could it do besides just controlling digestion and elimination? Can't be anything else. Anybody, what does the stomach do? It digests things. I wonder what the stomach could do emotionally and spiritually. Digest things! Jeez. Help you digest things. Help you digest the challenges you face in your life. What a radical concept. What does the esophagus do? It helps you take things in. It helps you deal with things. I wonder what the esophagus does for you emotionally.
Takes things in.
Oh! Praise God, it's a miracle. The organs do what they're supposed to do. Did you hear that? It's incredible. I don't trust this guy. He's a quack. Big quack. The organs do what they're supposed to do. He's a quack. Okay, whatever. So, today's talk. This is a strategy for bringing those gut resources of your stomach, helping you digest the issues you face in your life, of your jejunum actually helping you assimilate what you need to learn in your life, to bring those kind of important resources back online. And that actually supports optimum brain function. You're going, no, you're talking about the gut. What does this have to do with the brain? If your stomach isn't helping you digest issues, then guess what you have to rely on? I got to think about it. It's crazy where we have to go. The more this is offline, the more we're just like, ah! We're relying totally on our brain all the time. The more this is online, part of the process, the more this can make contributions in the way that it's meant to do. So this is all about not just optimal gut functioning, but then optimal brain functioning. And in that gut is courage, the guts to stand up. So that's what this is a talk about. The talk itself has 4 components. I'd like to introduce what gut-level trauma is, then talk about the theory of the technique and the practice of the technique, then I'd like to demonstrate the technique, then I would like everyone to have a chance to do the technique. So that's where we're going. So let's start with what gut-level trauma is. Gut-level trauma is where the ENS, what's that? Enteric nervous system. Where the enteric nervous system perceives overwhelmingly painful events from the past are still an ongoing reality. That's too technical. The ENS feels like painful things from the past are still happening right now. A horrible car accident is still perceived on a body level is happening right now. Birth trauma from 55 years ago in your life is perhaps still being perceived as an ongoing reality. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal? It means if my gut is offline, I'm going to sit in your office and I've given up. I don't have any guts to go forward. There's incredibly unacceptable things going on in my life, and I feel no capacity to influence my reality. I just passively accept it. I know he's a terrible man, but it's the best I can do. As the person just watches their life go by. This is what it's like to have your enteric nervous system offline from past traumas. That's why this is important. So what kinds of experiences could possibly do this? Notice I'm suggesting something different. In last year's talk, I talked about events breaking your heart. That's important. But also there's events that might break your gut, might break your will to move forward in your life. And sometimes it'll be the same event that does both. It breaks your heart and your gut. Really focusing on what has broken, if anything, your ability to move forward, to take risks, to take chances on having the life you really want. Public humiliation as a child might do that. Really strong public humiliation. Trauma in birth for infant or mother. I just have to do this. Look at that word. I know it's not culturally acceptable. This is the most unacknowledged trauma in the world as far as my awareness. What women sometimes have to go through to help us come here is just, it's completely ignored. And you're like going, well, what do you mean, Lee? I mean, the woman had a C-section, and because of C-sections might be perfectly the best thing to do for a lot of people, and for some women, they're incredible traumas to have all of the major meridians of your body just severed. And some women recover from it just like that, and some are flattened forever. And it's not talked about, it's not addressed, it's not honored. The woman's perineal floor was ripped open because her child was so big. She had a horrible reaction to Pitocin. I'm not saying Pitocin can never be good, but it's just so important to notice when a woman's life changed after giving birth, and to acknowledge that that's an incredible trauma. Again, why do you think this is so unacknowledged? Anybody? Starts with a P. Patriarchy. Don't buy into this. Darn it. Stop denying this in your practice. This is real. Okay. I just feel like that's so important. I had to be fanatic. Parasitic infections, bacterial infections that you never recover from fully. If you don't believe this, then ask someone with Lyme's. Concussions can disconnect the brain from the gut. For some, notice, and I'm not blaming women here, for some women they can't breastfeed, and regardless, for some infants, taking in cow's milk formula as the first food is incredibly traumatizing. Now you're like going, that's impossible. Imagine you have someone that's put on cow's milk formula and they're lactose intolerant. And for the first few months of life before it's figured out what's going on, they're constantly being effectively, their body senses they're being poisoned every minute they're eating. That can disassemble someone's enteric nervous system from the beginning. I'm not saying cow's milk formula always does that, but for some people, and I'm sure none of you in this room have food sensitivities. And none of you were born in the 50s like I was, where breastfeeding was kind of out of style. Substance abuse, alcohol abuse, where you break your own gut, where you break your own will. Unintended consequences of medical treatment. Chemotherapy often saves people's lives. And what is chemotherapy? It is being systemically poisoned. What does that do to your gut? It often takes it offline. So you can have someone that was brilliantly saved by modern medical interventions and energetically is destroyed. Don't deny that trauma. Just because they're alive, that's fantastic. But notice what's the quality of their life since that. This is a huge deal in my practice. I've had the privilege of working in the past few months with actually 5 people that had parents that were so angry all the time that how the parents punished their children was that one parent held the child down while the other parent kind of viciously washed the child's mouth out with soap. What does that do to your digestive tract? It takes it offline. They're trying to break the child's will. Does that make sense? And it happens. The gut goes offline. Notice this poor child. The world can break your gut. You can have a goal that you had in mind and not achieve it, and that can break your will to try again. Racism, sexism, bullying, and of course, it may not make any sense, incredible oral trauma. Sometimes dental treatment is magical, profound, and sometimes it's horrifying. And because that's the beginning of the track, that can take a gut offline. So is there any hope? Yes. The enteric nervous system, if there's trauma in it, that can be transformed. The gut can become an incredible resource. The brain can function more optimally, and courage can be revealed. And that's why we're here today. These examples are from my practice. They're all composites. There is no specific person I'm speaking about. Man, age 55, has had a permeating passivity in his gut, just a permeating passivity in his gut ever since surgery and chemotherapy saved his life 8 years ago. It happens. One session of what I'm calling establishing the resonance back into his enteric nervous system, where all the different parts can talk to themselves and each other, and the permeating passivity was gone. Woman comes in, 32, has had an incredible sense of hopelessness in her gut all her life. How's that possible? Birth trauma. 2 sessions, and that hopelessness in her gut feeling is gone. The goal in these situations is not about going back and figuring out what happened or going into the future. The goal is simply to bring the gut into present time, to bring it into the now. Because remember, the definition of trauma is where the body feels like it's in the past. So the goal of the strategy is to get the body into the now. It's not about venting your gut. It's about being rooted in your gut. Being able to trust your gut. Move mountains from your gut. So what's the theory then behind this technique, and what is the technique itself? The enteric nervous system is a network of neurons, again running from the esophagus down to the anus. Its goals on a mechanical level are to digest, metabolize, and assimilate everything good in what you eat, to eliminate everything what you don't need in what you eat, and to also protect yourself from anything that's toxic in what you eat. These are the goals of the system. And to accomplish this, all the components of the system must work together. This cooperation has to be from the top down, but it's not just a top-down system. It's also a bottom-up system. The cooperation has to be multidimensional. For example, the stomach and the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum. For the stomach to help the duodenum in its functioning, the stomach has to, in a top-down sense, tell the duodenum, okay, in around 40 minutes, I'm going to start funneling through to you Hostess Ho-Hos, a cheeseburger, and a Coke. Get ready. It'll be coming this fast, and the person had 3 cheeseburgers and 2 Ho-Hos, so the volume and everything. For the duodenum to really be prepared to do its work effectively, it has to know what's coming. But in the same sense, the duodenum has to feed back to the stomach, hey, are you funneling the stuff through too fast? Did you leave it in the stomach long enough for it to digest? Did you use enough digestive enzymes on the hostess ho-hos to make them usable? The cooperation has to be back and forth, up and down. This applies throughout the system. The small intestine in the inside and the colon on the outside. The small intestine is where a lot of assimilating, taking in nutrients happens. So when the food is at the very bottom of the small intestine has to feed into the colon and say, hey, this much food coming this soon, this type of food, all the different qualities, how much water's in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all these different components for the colon to be ready. This much, how fast, how much is coming through and behind that, what's on the way. And again, just like with the duodenum, the colon has to feed back. Hey, you're sending this food way too soon. Half the nutrients are still left in there. You're not doing your job, and you're feeding the stuff through way too fast. Way too fast. I can't cope with this. Am I making sense? This cooperation, this working together, I call resonance. That is not a technical term. That's a Lee word. I call that resonance. And again, it is from top to bottom and bottom to top. What does resonance mean? On a physiological level, resonance is going to support better digestion, better elimination, and steadier energy levels. And on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, resonance supports clear thinking, self-tracking, knowing who you are, and courage. But how could you possibly change this at all? It's down there. It's in your gut. And the answer is you use your brain to talk to your gut. But how would I possibly do that? Well, that's what the class is about, right? That's where we're going. How could I possibly use my brain to reconfigure, to establish more harmony in my gut? And that's why we're here today. What I want to cover is, what do you say when you talk to your gut? What parts of your gut do you say it to? And how would you glide a client or a friend through it? So let's start with, what do you say? Here's the sentence that I'm going to ask you to consider saying to each part of your enteric nervous system. Blank. Please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after. So for example, small intestine, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after the bullying stopped. Esophagus, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after I was born. But then you go, why should I have these things? Talk to the son. Lee's a sun worshiper. That's what this is all about. It's pathetic. Jeez. I'm going to ignore Lee. I'm just going to go like this. Esophagus, please notice your participation in enteric resonance after I was born. No son, just talking to the body. What's the problem with this sentence? Anybody know? If the son thinks it's still, if the esophagus thinks you're still being born, asking it what it feels about after being born isn't true because it's still being born. It's in a trauma vortex. Talking to it like this is useless. Great. So I encourage you, ignore the son and just do this. Talk to the parts of your body who are lost in a trauma vortex about how it was to not be in the trauma vortex. It'll help a lot. It should work really well. But why the sun then? Darn it. Why not, I don't know, somebody, anybody other than the sun? Why the sun? Everything that you see, you look around the room, everything you see, came from a molecular cloud that 4.5 billion years ago collapsed to form the sun. Everything. Everything in this room, everything on the planet itself, the moon, and all the planets came from a molecular cloud that 4.5 billion years ago became the sun. And guess how much of that cloud is the sun? 99.8% of that cloud that collapsed into this solar system is in the sun. Only 0.2% is in everything in this room and everything on this planet and in this planet and in all the other planets, and this is a tiny planet. Jupiter is so much bigger than this, it's unbelievable. Saturn is so much bigger. So it's like, on a physical level, I'm not asking you to believe me, on a physical level, the closest that the body has of a relationship to God is the sun. Is the sun God? No, I'm not saying that. But on an origin level, on a physical origin level, because to ask your body to talk to Muhammad, ask your body to talk to Jesus, bodies like to talk to things that are physically in substance. And the closest thing in this part of the universe to that is the sun. But I'm not saying the sun is God. But again, if you're like going, well, got the sun, whatever. Let me show you what life would be like if there was no sun. Is that because it'd be dark? Because we'd be dead. Without the sun, there is no life. You don't have to believe your body can talk to the sun. Just say the sentence. It'll work anyway. So if you just disbelieve it all, just do it. It will work anyway. It always works. So who would you say this sentence to? There are 11 parts of the enteric nervous system that we're going to work with. 11. Tongue and taste buds, esophagus, a lot of these things you know. Stomach, small intestine, colon. But then there's a lot of stuff you've probably never even thought of or heard of. I will explain them all today. At the same time, you need to know you do not need to remember them. And you don't need to know their function. I mean it. This is not about, I need to understand. No, you don't. But I need to understand. No. All you need to do is read the names from a sheet of paper. But how's that ever going to work? The amazing thing is that the parts of your body know their name when you say it. And they recognize your voice when you speak to it. And if you're a body worker and your client's enteric nervous system feels safe, their enteric nervous system will respond to your thoughts through your hands. Better, 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 better. Here we go. Better, better, better. And if you're a parent and your kid has been traumatized, your 5-year-old got traumatized and they've lost their willingness to take risks, you could work on them while they're sleeping. Better, 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 better. And if you're a pet owner, are you listening? Your dog gets attacked by another dog. Never was able to be the same again. You could help your dog get its guts back. Okay. To help you feel comfortable with the parts, remembering you don't need to remember them, just an introduction. What do these parts do? The tongue is a muscular organ that manipulates food during chewing and is used in swallowing. It's on average about 4 inches long from front to back and weighs about 2.25 ounces. Don't underestimate the tongue. That's how we meet the world when we're an infant. Now, the tongue is not officially part of the enteric nervous system. I said that the enteric nervous system starts here. You're like, oh, why am I talking about the tongue? The tongue is so reflexively tied into the rest of the enteric nervous system. You taste something and that feeds information into your stomach instantly about how it should prepare for that food to come into the digestive tract. And you taste something and the duodenum goes, I know what I'm going to do when that food gets down because I recognize that taste. So the tongue is intimately tied in. Taste buds are situated mostly on the tongue, but also on the cheeks, on the inside, on the top of the esophagus, on the epiglottis. It blocks fluid from going down into your respiratory tract. It's amazing. Of all the foods that you love to eat, that you love the taste of, we only have 5 kinds of taste buds. We make sense of all the different tastes, of all the different foods that you just fanatically love. You love to cook and prepare from only 5 different kinds of taste buds: sweet, sour, salt, bitter, and savory. Savory is the taste that MSG appeals to. It's pretty amazing. This is a scanning electron microscope image of tongue papillae where the taste buds are located. The human tongue on average has between 2,000 to 8,000 taste buds. This is a scanning electron microscope image of the taste buds of a sugar addict. Next on the tour, the esophagus is a muscular tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. It's about 8 inches long, and from front to back is behind your heart and in front of your spine. Contractions of the outer muscles of the esophagus is what moves food down from your mouth into the stomach. This is what a doctor sees when he or she is putting a scope down to look at your esophagus. Next on the corridor is the stomach. The stomach is a muscular organ. It's a muscular organ that emits acids and enzymes to digest food. The lining of the stomach, the rugae, has to be incredibly sturdy to withstand the acids. Now this picture kind of shows it, but check out this scanning electron microscope image of the lining of the stomach. That's how sturdy it is to withstand what goes on in the stomach. The stomach also has 3 layers of muscles in its outer wall, and they periodically contract and relax to mix the food that we're trying to digest. Next is the small intestine. And the small intestine has 3 segments: the duodenum, the jejunum, and ileum. The first stop is the duodenum, and it's about 10 to 15 inches long of the entire 20-foot length of the small intestine. The duodenum in the first segment is all about metabolizing. And what's metabolizing? Metabolizing is taking something and putting it into a usable state, transforming it into a usable state. And this transformation happens in the duodenum through the action of many enzymes that are designed to digest or break down specific foods. Sucrase to break down sugar, lipase for fats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a scanning electron microscope image of amylase. The duodenum also has direct line access to both your pancreas and your gallbladder to bring in pancreatic enzymes and bile to facilitate digestion. So again, into the duodenum comes both pancreatic enzymes and bile. The next 2 segments of the small intestine are the jejunum and ileum. And these images are almost bizarre. They look like they're from the moon. These are the little tongues of the jejunum. These are actually called villi, and it's the profound number of these villi, literally thousands and thousands of villi in the jejunum and ileum that make the surface area necessary for us to be able to take in nutrients. This is a more standard view of the jejunum through a scope, but then again going microscopic. Look at all the little villi. And it's in that tiny little surface area where nutrients cross over from the digestive tract into our body. This is where vitamins and minerals and proteins are taken in. It's a delightful scanning electron microscope image of, again, the villi of the jejunum. Here's a microscopic slide of the ileum. So the small intestine then has three components. It has that first component where we metabolize things and break it down. It has two components that are all about assimilating. But overall, that's the small intestine, metabolizing and assimilating. The next stop on the tract is the colon. The colon's about 5 feet long of the entire 30-foot length of the digestive tract. And it's all about eliminating the waste left after digestion. But that's not just it. I was even surprised to see this. The colon also has significant roles in assimilation. We take in vitamin K in the colon. We take in vitamin B1, B2, and B12. Also lots of water, but especially those vitamins. It's fascinating that it's still going on at this point. This is a beautiful image of goblet cells that protect the lining of the colon from toxins. Interesting, most of the challenges to our body in terms of organisms don't come in through the air we breathe. They really come in through the digestive tract. And the body has a response mechanism to that. This is either a picture of a pink pretzel on your blue carpet, or it's a bacteria in your human appendix. The body's response to this need to protect against toxins is called GALT, G-A-L-T. It's just abbreviated GALT. Stands for gut-associated lymphoid tissue. It's how the body protects itself from toxins entering through the mouth. And fascinatingly enough, guess what percentage of your white blood cells, etc., what percentage of your immune system is in your intestinal tract? And the answer is 70%. 70% of our immune cells are in our digestive tract. Most of it is just below the lining. So this is the lining of the colon. So just below that lining is where GALT exists. And there's a variety of different kinds of GALT throughout the digestive tract. This is a beautiful image of Peyer's patches in the bottom of the small intestine called the ileum. There's a lot of valves and sphincters in the digestive tract. There's one at the top of the esophagus, one at the bottom of the esophagus, one between the stomach and the duodenum, one between the small intestine and colon, and the sphincters at the anus. Valves and sphincters are circular arrangements of muscle fibers that play a pivotal role in determining the timing and direction of the flow of food. That's the image of the sphincter at the top of your esophagus when a doctor, again, he or she is putting a scope down to examine your digestive tract from the top down. And this is a scanning electron microscope image of that very important valve between the stomach and duodenum called the pyloric valve. Now, if you think these things aren't important, just talk to someone that has acid reflux, that can't sleep unless they're at an angle, that still they have a very difficult time sleeping. These valves are pivotally important in terms of keeping things moving in the right direction. Now, here's something I'm almost sure you've never heard of. Intestinofugal neurons, it's a bizarre name. Intestinofugal neurons, they actually exist all the way from the top to the bottom. And what these things do, which is so important, is that they are the gut's access to your sympathetic nervous system. But saying that isn't enough, because what's really going on here is that these neurons that go from your enteric nervous system to the sympathetic ganglia can only be used by the gut. The sympathetic nervous system cannot talk back to the gut along these phone lines. They are strictly, I mean this, they are strictly for the gut, telling the sympathetic nervous system what it needs. In other words, your mind could be going, I feel safe, I feel safe, I feel safe, I feel safe, and your whole brain could believe that. And if your gut goes, I'm not safe, what will your gut do? Send messages to your sympathetic nervous system to have you freeze in place. Who's going to win? I'm safe, I'm safe. This is a nice world, it's all safe. I'm scared! This wins. This is why oftentimes we can go, but I'm not really that scared. And your enteric nervous system is going, yeah, you are. You're just not aware of it. These neurons exist throughout the digestive tract, and they're the source of the gut being able to mobilize your resources to take tough stands. This is a picture of a Louisiana woman standing up after another black youth was killed against police. Now, on this one it says divine natural enteric microbiota. I have this choice there for clients. I ask them, there's oftentimes good microflora and bad. For the stuff that's good, what do you want to call it, divine or natural? I just give people a choice. But regardless of what word you like, the amount of cells and different kinds of cells is profound. The human gut contains on average about 40,000 bacterial species. 40,000. 9 million unique bacterial genes and 10 trillion microbial cells. The diversity has been compared to that of a rainforest. And these are really important things to understand. If it weren't for these microflora, there's a lot of foods that we could never digest. The microflora brings a lot of foods into an accessible state for us. This is from the National Institute of Health Microflora Project. Genes carried by bacteria in the gastrointestinal system allow humans to digest, fuse, and absorb nutrients that otherwise we would never be able to use. Again, from the National Institute of Health Microbiome Project. Microbes produce beneficial compounds like vitamins and anti-inflammatories that our body simply can't make. But it even gets more interesting. Because the intestinal flora, the flora of the entire tract, influences our behavior. There's many, many studies on this, many, so please don't think that this is just one. This is one of my favorite because it's so simple. So the study was done with what are called BALB/C mice, who are by nature very timid, very timid. So they're just, this is their safety zone, and they're like sniffing around here. I'm a BALB/C mouse. And then somebody in a lab injects my butt with a huge antibiotic cocktail formula over a period of several days. And after a few days, oh, God, there's so much new territory I've never explored before. This is incredible. I'm a BALB/C super mouse. Wow. Yeah. Stop the formula. Stop the treatment. Boy, that corner looks good again to me. Oh, this is great. I'm a BALB/C / all from a change in flora. There's study after study like this. Interneurons dominate throughout the digestive tract. The small intestine, for example, in the colon the duodenum has 3 layers. I could name them, they're just stupid names. And connecting those 3 layers of neurons is the enteric interneuron system. Enteric interneurons connect things up. So within the duodenum, it connects up the different parts of the duodenum to each other, and also connects up the duodenum to the jejunum, to the stomach. So these are the communication lines of the digestive tract, our enteric interneurons. And interestingly enough, anatomically, if I'm the duodenum and here's your pancreas and gallbladder, I don't have to go up through the parasympathetic nervous system to send a message up to the brainstem that I want some pancreatic enzymes. I just send a message along this straight phone line that only I can use. It says, I want some enzymes. I need some bile. I don't have to go through the brainstem to get that data. I just go, here's my neuron. I'm going to tell the pancreas right now what I need. It's incredibly powerful. There's whole books written about glia cells in the central nervous system. For many, many years, glia cells were just basically ignored because they don't transmit data like regular nerve cells. And they started to realize that glia cells were profoundly important to the health of the brain. And the glia cells that exist up in your brain also exist in your enteric nervous system. There are enteric glia cells that are these are actually slides of different glia cells at different parts of the tract. There's different glia cells all along the tract. This is an up-close look of glia cells of the colon. Without these glia cells that support neurons, resonance would be impossible. So that was the tract. Anybody have a question on any part of the tract? The spleen is not a digestive organ, it's more of a blood filtering organ. But it's pivotal in the body, not minimizing it. But it's not like the spleen produces enzymes that are used in digestion. It filters the blood after the digestion process. You could include it, but it's like if I went through and included everything that could be on the list, I'd probably have 20. I just picked the ones that were most pivotal. So the question that was asked, and I'm sorry I didn't repeat the first question. The question was asked, what happens in a C-section to the population by microflora? It still happens, but I think that they talk about it being, it's slower. Because going through the birth canal, once the water breaks, right, but again, what I'm saying is that once you're out in the world, then the population by microflora is just going to happen because you're eating, you're interacting. But a pivotal part of your developing microflora is the microflora of the mother. And that can be good or bad, right? Yes. UES and LAS are names for different valves. I will get to that. Yes. The question was, could you do this process if you're a foster parent? And the answer is, to me, as long as the child is, this is a Lee opinion, as long as the child is before puberty, which I feel like is a certain kind of level of spiritual transformation, then I feel like I could, if I had a child that I was protecting, that I could do this while they were sleeping. As soon as the child starts to go through puberty, and I feel like they really become, and you could ask it, the truth is, when do you need to ask permission? That's a spiritual issue that I really shouldn't, I just have my own personal opinions. It's like in my practice, as soon as someone is, I emphatically say, as soon as someone's 7 years old and they want to come in to see me, the child has to call me and say they want to come and see me. Because when children come in and they don't want to be there, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to get through this from their field. But in my own opinion, you could work on a child prior to puberty without them even knowing it, and then once they've gone through puberty, if you ask them for their consent, you could still work on them, whether they're your biological child or not. And that's my opinion. Someone else had a, yes, in the corner? It altered it. When they looked at her question was a good one. You would think that the antibiotics would have killed the microflora of the BALB/C mice. What it did is actually just altered the balance of it. So it didn't kill everything, it altered the balance, and that altering of balance made the mice adventurous. And then as soon as they were taken off the antibiotics, they started to revert back to their timid selves. And there's stuff. So the question is, how does the number of antibiotics that are in our food supply affect us? And that's a matter of personal opinion. I feel like it's profound. When I was doing this process on myself, this is just an example, and it's not really what she was saying, but it's from my own personal life. When I started to go through puberty, I started to have zits. My family was, I would say, rather profoundly unconscious on a certain level. Whatever the doctor said was go. So the dermatologist said, why doesn't Lee try some antibiotics for his complexion problems? I took those antibiotics for, anybody guess? Years. Years. That was a huge trauma to my enteric nervous system, because I was basically on a daily basis going, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's amazing I can do the work that I do with all the you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong that I sent. And the antibiotics helped my complexion guess for how long? Maybe 2 weeks. But then after that, it was the hope that it would come back and work more. And I was too stupid to know any different. I literally took them for, I think, 3 years. So how does the antibiotic on a small level that we get exposed through food, I feel like it has a similar action. And I think that it would be more for some people than others. So that some people that have a really kick butt, strong constitution might be able to stand up to that much more than someone that's energetically fragile like I am. So how do you guide a client through this kind of process? Here's the sentence again. Blank, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after. Again, if you choose natural enteric microbiota. Please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after I moved out. What would that mean? It's like you had an abusive family and you moved out, and that was a key turning off point for your trauma, moving out. Have the client say the sentence out loud 6 to 8 times for each part of the track, and then move on. There's no right order to do this in. There is no right order. If you find one part the client feels like, or you feel like is particularly important, you could say the sentence 10, 20, 30, 40 times while it's resolving trauma. Yeah? If there's no identified trauma, let me get to that. Okay, it's a very good question. Enteric Glia Cells, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after the chemotherapy was over. So what goes in the blank at the end of the sentence? What goes in the blank is one, a brief fact-based description of some event that has the fact-based description has no emotions. No emotions. I moved out, period. The event needs to be over. The way that the process is set up is for things that are over. The process could be altered to deal with events that are still ongoing. I'm going to say it real briefly. How would you alter that? You would say, it's like if it was in relation to something that was ongoing, you'd say, natural enteric microbiota, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance in relation to my dad's dementia. So instead of being after, it'd be in relation to. But the way that we're setting up the process right now is for events that are over. So what I would probably do in this situation you're asking is then go, if you don't know when this thing started, then when is it triggered in your life? When is it worse? Well, it's worse when I wake up in the morning. Okay, natural enteric microbiota, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance when I wake up in the morning. So then you switch to what triggers it. There should be no evaluations or judgments, so that sometimes when you're asking someone what they want to put in the blank, they go, I want to put my satanic mother. Repeating the phrase satanic mother is going to be traumatizing. It's not going to help resolve trauma. In the same sense, if you have someone who's had a child that died, I know this is cruel. You'd want them to say, after my child died versus after my child was viciously killed. Because if someone repeats the sentence, even if it's just after my child was killed, the word killed is highly charged, right? Died is enough of a charge. But killed is just going to, every time the person says it's like, and yeah, the person killed, and it's like, ugh. You're trying to make this as relatively neutral as possible. If the event happened 1,000 times, if your brother hit you 1,000 times, Just group them all together after each time my brother hit me. If the event is just too painful to say at all, then just use the year that it happened. So sometimes in my practice, if a woman was raped, they want to say that they were raped. It helps them to say it. And for some women, they go, I can't say that. What year did it happen? 1996. Okay, let's just say after 96. So Gall, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after 2012. These are not affirmations. I know how many of us love affirmations. Affirmations, I'm just going to program my mind to change my entire life. These are not affirmations. If you try to do affirmation with your gut will go like this. It will, because that's not what this is about. This is about a relationship between your gut and your brain. Affirmations be like, I'm trying to program my gut. And if you want to do that, great, but that's not this process. This is you going, notice the language. Please. What a freakish concept. An affirmation is, God damn it, stomach, Are you with me? This is not an affirmation. Our affirmations are great, but that's not what this is. This is about a relationship, yes. Thank you, Robin. That's exactly what I was going to say. When you said mind over matter, what it is instead of mind over matter, it's mind with matter, mind joined with matter. It's about a relationship. Colon, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after I stopped drinking. So how would you ever set this process up with a client? Very simple. Tell them that the enteric nervous system is the nervous system that monitors the function of the digestive tract. It runs from your esophagus down to your rectum. People don't want to hear the word anus. It has more nerves in it than the sympathetic and parasympathetic combined, and when it's online, it's the source of gut feelings of courage and self-understanding. And trauma can take those pivotal resources offline, and the goal of the process is to reestablish a relationship within and between the different segments to help reveal the truth of who you are now. Tell the client they don't need to know what the names or functions of anything is. All they need to do is say the words. If an emotion comes up during this kind of process, the goal is to stay with the process. This is not about, oh, someone gets into fear, let's go into the fear, let's dive into the fear. That's fine, but that's not this process, because this process is about resolution. It's not about denying emotions, it's just saying, it's like if an emotion comes up, this is actually kind of a Buddhist practice. Oh, I'm feeling really sad. Keep the process going. It's not about going, I'm not sad, it's like a lot of sadness up now, staying with the process. Tell the client that they can take a break or initiate a break whenever they feel like they need it. It's okay to take breaks. They might, during the process, feel immediate relief. A lot of times when clients start to say a word where there's a lot of trauma, they can't even say the word. They just go, they've been saying all these technical words, and then they say glia cells, and they go, glia cells. Because that's the trauma. Happens all the time. Or they might forget the word, and they might go, which word were we on? And it's because there's so much emotional charge on that part of the body. Any kind of body-based process can occasionally trigger a headache. The fastest way out of that is to simply acknowledge the fact that there's a vein that carries blood down from the head. It's called the superior vena cava. Simply talk to it for a moment and say, hey, superior vena cava, how well are you strongly connected with the right atrium and the heart as it brings blood down from the head, and the headache will just go away. This rarely happens. It rarely happens that someone gets queasy during this process, but if they did, here's the vein that brings the blood up from the gut. If the gut gets emotionally overwhelmed with what you're doing, focus on the blood coming up from the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. Same kind of statement. It always works to clear it. I would like to make, this is not this situation. There are some clients that you might have that are nauseous all the time. Nauseousness is just a theme of their life. I encourage you to not feel like that's just an emotional experience. Unrelated to this class, there's actually a reflex called, what would you guess? The vomit reflex, which is how a body forces you to regurgitate something that's terrible that's in your stomach, that for some people is turned on all the time. Have them sent to someone like me or someone else that knows how to turn that off. It's oftentimes life-changing. Please don't say that they're just resisting. They're not resisting. Feeling nauseous all the time, feeling like you're going to throw up all the time is an incredibly physiologically destabilizing reality. For recovered memories, here's the sentence I suggest. Blank, please ask the son about your participation in enteric resonance after I recovered the memories. Now, why am I saying this? One, oftentimes when there's memories recovered, one of the most traumatic parts of it is what? The recovery. So you're saying there's all the events that happened, and then you're saying as well, I want to include the recovery itself. And secondly, unfortunately, sometimes recovered memories are what? They're lies. Out and out manufacturing reproductions from the brain, from the intellect, trying to explain away their pain. And you're like going, well, no, wait a minute. Stick the hand. So, how would you want to try to establish enteric resonance to get your gut to really trust itself around an event that never happened? This is not going to help. So using this format protects you from false recovered memories. It allows you to deal with them if they are real, and also deal with the pain of falsely recovering, even if you don't know it's a false recovery. So that's why I suggest this approach. It covers everything. It allows for the times when they're right and when they're not. What are your jobs once the process starts? We're getting into the break. If you're like, well, when's the break? We're almost there. What are your jobs once the process starts? Be present. Merging isn't helpful. Just be present. Help the client switch between the parts. Help the client stay with the process versus diving into the emotion. The person starts to feel really sad and you go, that emotion's totally okay. That's totally okay. And let's just stay with the process. During the process, the client will oftentimes go, oh, I remember this time where this happened. It's important for the therapist to jot that down. I've never done this process where the person's gone into a flooding. I've never done the process and have a person even come close to flooding, because the process is largely about getting more in your body versus going into a dissociative fugue of a reenactment. But if you ever did have that happen, you'd want to do the same kind of things you would always do. Have the person focus on current sensory reality. If a person's in your office flooding, going like this, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and you want to bring them back, don't ask them what they're feeling. That's the problem. Ask them, look in my eyes, Sarah, look in my eyes. What color are my eyes are? Look at the clock, Sarah. What time is it now? What time is it now? What color is the chair? Current sensory reality is how you get someone out of reenactment, not by asking them more about what they're feeling, because the feeling state is the problem in a reenactment. It's okay to switch between different events. If someone's working on one event and they feel like another event is more pivotal, is more a source of the problem, it's obviously totally okay to shift anywhere along the process. Then it's good to do cross-crawl at the end and self-worth to get this stuff to integrate into your brain. Can everyone stand up? This is cross-crawl. This is to get the brain to catch up with the gut. Very good. And then do it behind your body. And then in front again. Great. And behind. Very good. Again, this is getting the brain to catch up. The other one's called self-worth. Why? I don't have a clue. Your hands are like this or this, and you draw an 8 front to back with your hips. And then do the same thing but change direction. Very good. So those are the self-worth moves. Have a seat. Now we're going to... Can you do the process on your own? Of course you can, if you're focused enough. If you can stay with the process versus getting flooded. If you can follow through with completion. Don't do it while you're driving. Jeez. I had the guts to run some over. Thanks for the process. We're going to come back and I'll do a demonstration. While people are still coming back, a couple of people during the break asked me about colonoscopies. And my feeling is that colonoscopies are oftentimes life-saving. And for some people, colonoscopies are traumatic. Why would that be possible? The answer is, which direction does the enteric nervous system move things? Down. And what happens in a colonoscopy is that it takes a probe and basically goes up reverse through your colon, right? That's backwards. Now, I would say for most people by far, after doing that, after a few days, the person's back. They're just back. They're back in their digestive tract, they're back emotionally, and for some people, they're not back. And they're not back. For those people, I would encourage you to do this process on what? After the colonoscopy. Or see someone that does craniosacral work or acupuncture, or someone that can help your system get back. The thing I would most strongly say is if the doctor says it's not possible, that you're feeling more emotional since the colonoscopy, then just go, just snicker and do something about it. Because I literally would not be alive if not for Eric Anderson, urologist in town, with my kidney stone history. I wouldn't even be alive. And at the same time, the medical system's tracking of trauma is pretty bad. And again, doctors, I wouldn't be alive, literally. So I'm not saying don't go to doctors. I'm saying doctors oftentimes look straight into the eyes of their client and can't see how traumatized they are by the procedures they're doing. So take care of those kinds of aspects of the medical system outside of the medical system. In the counseling environment, et cetera. So several people asked me about colonoscopies, that was just my opinion. Yes?
What about colonics?
To me, sorry to say this, for some people, colonics, they love them, they feel like they help incredibly, and for some people, they just reverse the heck out of the system. And then the problem is that sometimes when a colonic reverses the energetics of the person's colon, the colonic therapist says what? It's just a healing crisis. Just like what the doctor would say after a colonoscopy. What am I saying? I'm saying notice how well you're doing afterwards. If something doesn't feel right, then you're not wrong. That's pivotal. Don't let the person shame you into going, I must be doing something wrong. I must be interfering. I must be resisting. Ugh. Colonoscopies go backwards. Colonics go backwards. And I know for some people, colonics, they feel like they wouldn't be alive without them. That's great. And for some people, colonics totally reverse the enteric nervous system. Sorry. Enemas, the question was about enemas, and my response is, again, for some people, they're profound. They really help a lot. And for some people, again, first off, they can become addictive to the enteric nervous system, and the enteric nervous system starts to rely more on the enema than on its own natural dynamics. But again, for some people, they have to do it. So there is no simple answer. I'm just saying track what helps the body be more vital. And again, as far as the enteric nervous system, there's the process that I'm describing today, and then there's 10 or 12 reflexive connections between the brainstem and the enteric nervous system that can be profoundly important, that can be a whole nother layer. So there's other factors beyond this. So if this process doesn't work for you, there's other things you could also do. It's not just this, but this is the best thing that I've come up with. Okay, so Sarah was nice enough to volunteer. And can you just really briefly say what we're working with?
So I had a baby in 2012, and since then I've had a number of physiological symptoms, as well as as well as really strong, intense emotional symptoms, including rage, which is not so fun when you have a little one.
Yes. Okay. And is that rage something you can actually feel if you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
So just to be EMDR-ish, EFT-ish, whatever, if you think about that emotion right now, just let it be there for a few seconds. How strong is it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think I'm experiencing more fear right now.
Just from being up here, or, okay, is it possible to find the anger, or is that hard to in this environment?
No, I can find
Okay.
it.
So if you let it just be there for 10 seconds, how strong is it?
About a 5.
Okay, great. So you have your paper with you so that I can still look at mine? So how would you like to phrase it? After the name of the child was born, or after the, how would you like to just, what would be your after event? For a lot of mothers, it's just after Ben was born, or how would you like to say it?
After Jendaya was born, there was a little more trauma that happened after the birth. So
Is that important, so we should include that?
yeah, I mean, I almost died, so.
I would say that's pretty important. So can you, what else happened? You bleeding, or? Okay, so how long after the event was your life no longer at threat?
Sorry.
I'm so glad you volunteered. Did they do some procedure that got it to end?
I had 2 blood transfusions,
Okay.
and I was uncontrollably shaking until, I felt like I wasn't in my body until I started to warm up after the second blood transfusion, but it took a while.
Okay,
I remember I started to get back in when my husband and daughter showed up because
yes.
she was born at home. I got rushed to the hospital. They stayed at home until the procedures were done, and then they came, and when they showed up and I saw them, I came back in.
Yes.
Which
How much, were you in the hospital for a day, or you went home right away?
I spent our first night there, and then the next morning left.
Okay, so would it feel okay to you to say, after I went home?
Yeah,
After I went home with my baby?
after I went home with my baby.
Does that feel like the trauma was over as of then, as far as the medical and the health? Would you say that's an okay way of saying it, or?
Well, the trauma continued. My daughter was severely underweight, so we had to wake her up every 2 hours to feed her. And I was so depleted, my teeth were gray, and I couldn't stand up for.
Wow. So again, so when would you say that you felt like you were really on the upswing? How far out do we have to go? Don't worry about it.
At least a year, I would say.
Okay. All right, so what year did this happen? What year was your child born?
November of 2012.
November of 2012.
And I had postpartum depression for that first year, so
Okay.
that's why.
So would we say after 2014 or after 2013? Again, what's better for you to say? What do you feel like?
So the trauma of the birth, it's hard to know
Yes.
exactly when that ended, you know.
Can we say after 2013?
Sure, yeah.
Let's try that, and if it ends up feeling wrong, then you stop us,
Okay.
okay? So why don't you turn to the page, which is 10.
10?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I just want you to know how many women have gone through stuff like this. And it's not because they did anything wrong. This is what got a lot of us here, is women going through, being willing to go through like something like this to bring us here. Okay. So what you would do is say after 2013, meaning after that was over, and say tongue and taste buds.
Okay. Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Okay, just keep repeating that.
Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Tongue and taste buds. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
You're doing great. Esophagus.
Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Esophagus. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
And go on to the next, stomach.
Stomach. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Stomach. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Stomach. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Stomach. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
You're doing really good. Small intestine.
Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Small
doing really
intestine.
good.
Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Your body's realizing that 2013 is over. You're doing really good.
Small intestine. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Take a break. Doing great. You okay with going on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Colon.
Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Keep going.
Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Colon. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Galt.
Galt. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Galt. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Galt. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Keep going.
Galt. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Galt. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Do you have any problem with reflux or anything? I'm not reading anything. I'm just asking. Are you free of that?
I don't have reflux.
Great. I'll talk about the valves later. Enteric valves and sphincters, just do them all at once.
So,
Enteric valves and sphincters. You don't have to do the individual ones. Just say that for me.
just say enteric valves and
Yes.
sphincters? Okay. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Keep going.
Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric valves and sphincters. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Okay. Intestinofugal neurons.
Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Doing great. Keep going.
Intestinofugal neurons. Please ask the Sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Keep going.
Intestinofugal Neurons, please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Intestinofugal Neurons, please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good. Do you like the word natural or divine for the good microbiota?
Divine.
Okay, try that.
Divine Enteric Microbiota. Is that how you spell microbiota?
Great.
Okay. Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good job. Keep going.
Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Divine Enteric Microbiota. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Enteric interneurons.
Enteric interneurons. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric interneurons. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric interneurons. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric interneurons. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Good. Enteric glia.
Enteric glia. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric glia. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric glia. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric glia. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013. Enteric glia. Please ask the sun about your participation in enteric resonance after 2013.
Great. So if you were to check in right now, we started off and there was about a 5 level of anger.
Mm-hmm.
If you check in again, is it still a 5? Is it worse? Is it less? What's it like now if you think about it?
Much less. Probably. I just feel very calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks.
Do you feel like doing this again, one more cycle, or do you feel like you've gotten enough? Where do you feel like you are?
I feel like I want to take a nap.
So let's do some brain gym if we can.
Okay.
Why don't you stand up and...
Okay.
Great. So you stand here. Okay, so with the brain gym, you go like this and touch one hand to the opposite knee. Very good.
I want the music.
Yeah. Give her the music. So if anybody asks a question you don't want to answer, just say, I don't want to answer. Anybody have a question for either of us on the process? If there's none, that's fine. Anybody?
Was there a body part that you felt more sensation in doing the process?
So the question that was asked, just to make sure everyone hears, is, was there any body part where she felt a particular sensation, or was it more neutral?
Yeah, it was all alive in here.
Were there any of the parts that most struck you? Or?
Small intestine was really alive. Yeah, when I did that, it was like talking to me. And I'm not aware of where my I am not anatomy minded, but it was like when I did small intestine was like, here I am.
That's great.
Yeah, so.
That's great, because you don't need to even know where these things are. Anybody else?
So she started with fear. If this trauma has more emotions attached, should she then repeat it with a different emotion?
If she thought of the event and there were other emotions, we'd do it again. So the question was, if there's more than one emotion attached to an event, what you're looking for is that the event itself is flat, that there's nothing left. So doing it again, because, oh, but I also feel this. And if you say, I also feel this, you might need to focus on a different aspect of the event. You might.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was thinking sometimes, because even though the trauma kind of continued, it
Yeah.
seemed like there were some like really dramatic events, like seeing blood clots coming out of my body
Yes.
that were so huge that I was like, that's not my placenta. What is this? Like, that was really traumatic for me. So just remembering specific events.
So then you can go, after I saw, she asked, so there were specific events or parts of the process that she remembers herself were particularly frightening. You could do the process on after I saw the blood clots splash. Once you've gotten the overall charge down, then to go for specifics would be really appropriate.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Now that she's not so flooded by it. So the question was, what happens if you don't know any feelings that are associated? The answer is, if someone knows that their life was different after an event but doesn't have any idea how they're different, you could do it. But if there was no noticeable difference, it's like then to do it on a particular event because it's traumatizing for many people, that's kind of neutral. There has to be something that's really interesting to try to recover for the person. I'm trying to help the person get back a certain level of themselves that hasn't been there anymore. But if the person doesn't know what they lost, that's fine. Yes?
Can you do it yourself, or is it better to have someone with you who kind of help?
I do it with myself all the time. I've had clients that do it on themselves all the time, and then there are some clients where doing it on themselves is just absolutely terrifying and they can't do it. Or they're not motivated enough. If you are motivated enough to do this, one of the key things I would suggest, if you're going to do this on your own, is to take it seriously, to not start it when there's 15 people around and you're going to be interrupted. Because let's say that, for example, I did this on the time that my dad said that life is cruel, get over it. So there's actually a particular language he used. He was kidding me mercilessly because he loved to, and he said, this is how the world is. I'm trying to help you understand how the world is. If I started to work on that event and I didn't plan enough time, if it's like, well, I'll just do this for 2 minutes, the problem with that is that if Ursula comes into the room after those 2 minutes, I'm still in process. So I can delightfully project all of my dad all over my wife because I haven't given myself enough time. So that's the only really caution I have to working on yourself, just to make sure to take it seriously. To go, okay, I'm gonna set down 15 minutes to do this process on this event. Then I feel like, especially if you're someone that's meditated before, then this process in a way is a neurological meditation. This is a kind of meditation. So that's my major qualifier, is giving yourself enough time. And I should also say, do you feel safe enough to work with this one event, or is this event too flooding? So a lot of times it's best to start with smaller events to build up your sense of how the process goes and how much you can manage. Because there might be some events that I need help with. But there's a lot of things that people can work on themselves, and I totally encourage it.
Can you speak into that at all?
So the question that she's asking, is why do I reference the sun? And
Or how it brings you to present time?
to me, what the sun says, the sun is brutally honest. It's not going to go, oh, Lee, you're okay. It's going to go, this is the truth. So if parts of my gut feel like I'm still in utero, then the sun's not going to be cruel, but it's just going to go, Lee, it's 2017, you're living with Ursula. It's not going to kind of like go, well, it's just going to go, boom. Because the sun's like that for me. It's just like it's irreversibly truthful and incredibly compassionate at the same time. So that it's like, if you want the truth, ask the sun. But that's a Lee theory. That would be more based on the guy that inspired my work, who was a brilliant healer, and I don't even qualify to be his janitor. Someone had a question over here.
I was wondering how you decided when you were going to move from one
So when I decided was, there were lots of times where she was going through this, and she did a brilliant job, where I was starting to come up with all these little gimmicks that I do during the process. It's like literally when she was saying intestinofugal neurons, that could have been probably 2 or 3 times as effective if I'd had her spell that word. And I knew that because I've done it in the office hundreds of times, because that part of her body was so offline from this trauma, just so offline, that I went, and I went, Lee, shut up. That's a Lee gimmick. Here's the basic process. The only thing that I was allowing myself to do here that you saw me doing was I could track when a process was done. I can just feel it. So a lot of you might be going, he's not looking at her, and he's not looking at her, he's a terrible therapist. I feel things. So I can just feel it. It's just like the energy's done, so it's time for the next one. And if you watch her breathing, it was just like there were certain moments where it just went, ooh. So what am I tracking? I'm tracking breathing state, I'm tracking autonomic neurological state, and that's just something that I do like breathing. But if someone were to break it down, what do people that are good at reading bodies do? They track breathing, they track eye movements, they track all these things that are actually physiological signs. It's not like someone being intuitive is coming out of nowhere. There's just certain signs that some people tune into and some people don't. Yes, the voice actually changed in the process of doing certain of the phrasings. And you could actually just track the auditory tone to know when it's done. Because if you just tracked auditory, I'm very kinesthetic. If you're very auditory sensitive, you notice that the languaging starts to change, and then at some point the languaging is just flatline. Her saying it again and again and again, she has the same tonality. That means it's done. So you could track what I'm tracking on an auditory level, you could track it visually, you could track it kinesthetically, or you don't have to track it at all and just have the person say 6 to 10 times. Yes?
What is your approach if someone comes in and they have a specific emotion they're feeling and they can't track it?
So the question was, what do I do if someone comes in with an emotion and they can't track an event? So I'm going to give you a really truthful response. The first thing that I would do within the context of my work, I would try to notice what part of their system was under stress. Is it more their brainstem? Is it more their gut? Is it more their heart? So now we're talking about Lee work. And I'm like going, so where is this? What part of the body, if it's a part of the body at all, is really warbling here? And then I try to work there specifically. A lot of the processes I do don't have to have any languaging. The reason for this is because it's a technique that a therapist could do because it's based on languaging. There's a lot of strategies that I do in the office where there's no language at all. So if the person had no contextual understanding of an event, then what you can do without, all the different avenues that I have is you can go, can anyone guess what event you'd start with if you didn't have any idea? Birth. Just do it. Literally, I mean it. Just do it. And maybe the birth was incredibly elegant. The birth from the mother's perspective was the most magical event in the universe. And there was a moment in the process of going through the birth canal where the cord got twinged just for a moment and the baby's life felt threatened for a moment. Through no fault of the woman. Good. Just part of life. part of life on this planet is stuff like this. Sometimes the births that are the most traumatic are for women that did everything possible to have the most elegant birth possible. It's profoundly unfair in that way. It's just what happens. Just one more question, because then we want to get on to practice.
So this is communicating on a neurological basis. How does it, when you ask a lot of requests of the enteric nervous system, how does it come into the brain purposes or the body? What happens now? Like, is she clear of all that? Like,
So,
what happen over time? Or how does
so the question was, how does this integrate with the rest of the body? How does this resonate with the rest of the mind? So I could be really, really honest. I could make up a story. If I was to guess, there'd be other systems that were involved in this for her. So that probably what's going to happen after this process is that the overall charge is going to decrease, and then it might decrease all the way down, just gradually decrease. What would tend to support that? That this would work, and then it would just gradually keep on getting better. The answer is if the person has a really, really good, healthy constitution. I'm sorry. You go, oh, it's this, and that could include a good diet. If the person has a terrible diet, the process might tend to get more interrupted because there's not as much food elegance to support it integrating. But if someone has an incredible, how was she before the birth? How much vitality and flexibility and emotional integrity, how much were the juices really flowing before this experience happened? And if it was just from this event, then clearing up parts of this event could get it all just to start to click online. But this might reveal other traumas that were there before that. So that when they talk about Vietnam, people returning from Afghan or Vietnam, what's one of the biggest factors that determines how much they're traumatized by the war? And the answer is how much trauma they had before they went into the war. So for someone that has a body that's incredibly unelegant like mine, I do this process on this event, and then guess what? Well, then I have to do it on the next event. And then I have to do it on the next event. And for people that have a lot of elegance, they do it on this end of their body. While they're sleeping that night, it starts to go through and do it on its own through 2 or 3 other events. It just starts to move. And that's for people that have what I would call grace. Just like this elegance in their physiology where you do one thing and then they just go like this, and they come in a few weeks later and they've made this huge change, and it was hardly anything to do with you. It was just because you re-stimulated their elegance. And then for other people, you do this, and then they come in 2 weeks and they go, well, I'm a little bit better, but now we need to do this, and you do this, and then they're a little bit better. And that's just the nature of reality. And it's not because someone's resisting. It's just the nature of bodies that they're all so different. Thank you so much for volunteering. I really appreciate it. On page 15, someone asked me about the valves and sphincters. In general, I almost always just have the person say enteric valves and sphincters, and there are some people where some of the specific valves might be good to focus on. So the UES is the upper esophageal sphincter. It's up here, and if someone had trouble swallowing, that can be helpful. The LES at the bottom of the esophagus before the stomach and the pyloric valve are good when there's reflux problems. Reflux. The ileocecal valve is oftentimes very good after parasites, if they were very bad parasites or after an appendectomy. And the anal sphincters would probably be really good after if there's a lot of hemorrhoids. Okay, the question was, how long would you want to wait between doing the process on one event and then doing it on another? The answer is, I'd probably say the first time you do it, probably wait until the next day to see if there's any kind of adjustment process. For people that are really into self-care like I am, I remember when I learned my first self-care technique, I just did it on everything. And the first day and the next day I was like, because my body was integrating so many things at once, it was just, so you might want to try it on one thing and check out how well you can tolerate it and then try it again. That would be my suggestion. Just give your body some space to give you feedback about how it works. Yes? Great question. Does it have to be in their native language? First off, if you're a body worker, what? The question was, what happens if someone is not native English? Do the words have to be in their language? Problematically, if they're going to be able to say them, they might have to be translated. But as far as the body understanding, for example, if someone's a body worker and they're doing this process on someone non-verbally, it doesn't make any difference because the body will understand. So if someone can't speak, then again, you could just have them read it. But if you're working with someone that can't speak English, then translating the words would most likely be important. But if I'm doing the work for them through my hands, it would be irrelevant because their body understands any language. So what she said was at the end, she did a process where she said the entire enteric nervous system and everything within to try to group it all together to try to establish some integration. That sounds delightful. That's great. Very clever. 25-point penalty for violating the rules, but good idea. But those points will count in your final total. Yes, was there a question? So the question is, if you find a particular one that seems particularly important, can you hang out with that for a long time? And the answer is totally. It was actually something I tried to emphasize earlier. I'm glad you're asking me to mention again. If there's a particular part of the body that has a lot of charge, you could repeat it for minutes and minutes and minutes. And it might take the whole charge down, because sometimes there might be one aspect of the body that holds the entire charge. No. She said, if you stop in the middle, is that a problem? No. If you find a phrase that keeps working, keep working it. Good question. Anybody else? Yes? Okay, so the question was, during the midst of the process, both individuals in the group found themselves switching back to from one of the earlier terms, for example, maybe the immediate prior term. That could be A, because that term was more important. It could be B, you're trying to run away from the part that does matter. Or C, none of the above. Or D, you're hungry. Or E, your bladder's full. Or I don't know. Or the person next to you farted. I don't have a clue. Yeah, that's switching parts is actually, again, one of the most common things is where people someone can say the phrase 2 times elegantly, and as soon as they start to really access the trauma, they can't say the word anymore. Intestinal. Very common. Yes. So the question is great. So that sometimes there's microflora like, is it called small intestine overgrowth? SIBO. Where there's actually certain part of the microflora that I've just taken off are incredibly imbalanced. Have I ever talked to them? I probably wouldn't talk to them using this process just on a hunch, but you could try it. You know, there's a level where I feel like if I have parasites that are bad, I don't really think they care what I feel. But that's my perspective. If you feel like you can get into relation to them and talk to them about leaving, go for it. I don't think it's going to harm, but I'm not sure how productive it will be, because I think to a certain extent, if you have tapeworms, they like it here. So if someone had pre-birth trauma, then what your deciding event could be after I was born, or if there was a particular moment, for example, where during the term, where at 4 months term, the mother was in a terrible car accident, you could do after the 5th month. So no, working in utero is totally fine because the system's in development. Great questions. I'm sorry, we're out of time. I don't want to hold people after. So, summary quickly. The enteric nervous system has more nerves than the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems combined. It can override the brain, whereas these two systems can't. Just because trauma writers ignore it doesn't mean it's not incredibly important. Just because trauma writings don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not incredibly important. This is your gut sense of safety, your gut understanding of who you are in the world. It can be profoundly important. It can be an incredible resource. It can take away your ability to move forward in your life if it's traumatized enough. This process is actually about using your brain to try to help the enteric nervous system come back online, to have it come into resonance, to help your brain be more optimal, just to have it be vital. Courage is a good thing. Thanks so much for coming. Have a great evening.